So Anne and Steve, welcome. First, how are you feeling coming off of early victories so far this cycle, and maybe use it as an opportunity to introduce yourself and office that you're running for and a little bit on your background?
Let me just make sure it's on. It is. Good morning, and thank you for getting up early on a Sunday morning. Ann Diamond. I am a family physician out of a little hamlet in the Cascades of Washington. Literally, in the winter, we have 50 people. And I've been a small town doc, started my own practice in this beautiful valley 20 years ago. And my challenge has been to get my name out of the little valley, because I'm known in my community, but I'm not known throughout the state. And winning a primary has been an enormous boost, because up until now, I didn't know if it was viable. I didn't know if an independent could, when it's a very strong two-party state. We have a split legislature, 48-50, 48 Republicans, 50 Democrats, and there's never been an independent. I think equally striking for my community, there's no physicians in our state legislature at either level. And that means that health policy decisions are being made by individuals who don't understand it on the ground. So that would be my introduction. I don't know if I completely answered your question.
Good way to start. Steve.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Steve Poizner from California. Most of my career has been starting and running technology companies in Silicon Valley. I've started 3 of them. And please do not tell my opponent this, but not one of them has gone according to plan. At least not according to the original plan. Just to give you an example of some of my background, one of my companies was called SnapTrack. You probably never heard of it. But you have my technology with you right now. We did figure out how to put a GPS receiver into a cell phone. Turned out to be an important feature. Sure. Yeah, actually, the reason why we did it, we sold the company to Qualcomm, and now there's 2 billion of these things out there, but it was really for medical response, for 911 to be able to pinpoint the location of a cell phone caller in an emergency situation. So I've also been very active in the not-for-profit and in the government sector in California, too. I've gone back and forth between sectors over a 30-some-odd-year period. I like to spend time in multiple sectors. It helps really to broaden out my skill set. So I'm running for insurance commissioner now for a second time. I was elected insurance commissioner in 2007. I am the last Republican to get elected statewide in California since 1994. That was in 2007. Now, maybe some of you are thinking like my daughter. I have a 26-year-old daughter. When I was elected insurance commissioner, she was a teenager. On election night, she comes up to me and says, "Insurance commissioner, is that the most boring job in the state of California?" Well, my daughter Rebecca, don't tell her this, but it's a fantastic job. And I'm running again for the job for 2 reasons. First, the insurance commissioner, like in a lot of states, it's elected in 15 states, the insurance commissioner has huge amounts of power. One person in California oversees a $300 billion insurance sector. It really has a big impact. California, sadly, is on fire right now, tons of wildfires like in other states, and so lots of insurance issues really at the core of many issues in the state of California. So I'm running again because it's a great job, it's an executive position, you can really get a lot done. The second reason why I'm running is because I want to be the first independent in California history to ever get elected to a statewide post. I am the first person ever in California history even to get into the general election as an independent. And I'm going to be really, really proud and pleased to pioneer a path for people in California that want to create more choices for voters.
Thank you. So 2 potential history-making opportunities in November. First, potential independent state representative in Washington. First, potential independent statewide elected official. Just taking a step back, can you explain to folks in the room who don't know what is a top 2 primary? How does it work? What might be the pros and cons in running a primary for an independent?
I'll explain how it works if you want to take on the pros and cons. How it works is anybody who wants to run, runs. So there were 4 people ultimately in my race, 2 Republicans, a Democrat, and myself. And on August 7th, We have mail-out ballots, so everybody gets a ballot in the mail who is registered, and you get to vote for the one person that you think will be best. And the two people who get the most votes go on to the general. Simple as that.
Yes, so the top two primary structure was passed in 2010 in California, thanks to some people here, matter of fact, and then it kicked in 2014. Huge, major, positive reform in California. When I ran for insurance commissioner the first time, closed primaries, you can't run as an independent. It's just not a practical thing. Even though the position is clearly a good fit for an independent, now I can put my money where my mouth is and running as an independent because it's the right thing to do thanks to the top two structure. So yeah, I ran against 4 people and came in first place in the primary on June 5th. 2.6 million people voted for me in the primary. I'll need 4 million votes to win in the general election. I know California is a huge scale, and I'll be really pleased if I can help get over the line, because I know it will change the narrative nationally about the viability for independent candidates.
Yep. So one distinct advantage, obviously you only have one opponent. And so in your race, Republicans don't have a candidate of their own. In your race, Democrats don't have a candidate of their own. It seems like a positive of that is that they may be more open to voting for you. A negative of that is maybe, do you get pegged as being the Republican in your race or the Democrat in your race, and how do you deal with that, Ann?
So I have a text right now from the Democratic Party for Legislative District 12 that I have not yet responded to, asking me to endorse their platform and announce that I am seeking their endorsement. And I am not going to do it, and I have to compose a kind note back saying, thank you for being interested, but if you haven't noticed, I'm running independent, and I beat your candidate in every single county.
That's awesome. Yeah, not having to run against multiple people is a really big deal, really big advantage of the top two. So, like in California, 24% of the state are Republicans, 26% of the state are independents, and 44% of the state registered Democrats. So you can actually put together various kinds of coalitions that wouldn't be possible if you had a field of multiple candidates.
I want to ask you both, what message did you find resonated most with voters in your race? What worked that you won your elections? And I imagine there's a little bit of a difference. You're campaigning one-to-one, knocking on doors. Steve, I don't think there's enough time in the year to go door-to-door in California. So maybe what is the difference between kind of mass communication that you're working with versus the grassroots? So what did you see worked?
I actually have a really big district, but I'm sitting next to somebody from California, so I can't whine about it. I am knocking on doors. But in my county, we have 8 people per square mile. So knocking on doors is not the image that you think of. And the population base is in Wenatchee. What I know best is knocking on doors. And when you're standing on somebody's porch and you say, hi, I'm a family doctor, I'm running for state legislature. And the first thing is they realize that you're not a missionary and that you're not asking for money. And then when they figure out that you're the candidate, they often will open the screen door and come and stand out with you. And I do want to emphasize that people are kind. They might disagree with you, but it is not the popular conception that folks are coming out raging. And what I normally say after saying I'm a physician and I'm running is I say I'm an independent, and I wait. And I wait to see what their reaction is. And if I get none, I say, for some people that's a barrier. They're not quite sure what an independent might be. And for me it means that I'm going to be representing you, not one of the parties. And I have to say the most frequent single response is a high five. And people respond, I'm an independent. I always look at the person. And we've thought about the tagline, I'm an independent just like you. So I don't know that there's a particular strategy except to wait and see what the response is. And then lean into the fact that people want to think for themselves, want to be heard, and if you give them the space, they will come around to saying, they're independent too.
What's worked for you, Steve?
Yeah, so in California, a key part of my strategy is to go after newspaper editorial board endorsements. So there are 8 newspapers that weighed in my race in the primary, and there'll be like 20 that will take a position in the general election. And these newspaper editorial boards are super important because I've been a lifelong Republican until recently. By the way, the most liberating thing I've ever done in my life is to become an independent. Oh my gosh, it's been great. But newspapers, are going to do the due diligence to determine is this an authentic thing or is this some kind of political maneuver? As it turns out, it's really helpful that I'm on record 10 years ago saying that the position I'm running for should be a nonpartisan position. That helps. It also helps that the newspapers are spending the time to dig into my track record of how I did when I was insurance commissioner in the past. So getting these newspaper editorial boards, will just be absolutely critical to my sort of mass communication strategy. So should I mention how did I do with the editorial boards? Well, I wouldn't bring it up if it wasn't good news. Every newspaper endorsed me in the primary, so I'm
So glad I
8 for
asked.
8. So thank you for asking.
So you're both trying to do something that's literally never been done before. As we sort of brought up yesterday, one of the biggest barriers that we face is just trying to get over that viability argument, get around that wasted vote idea. How did you navigate that pre-primary, and has winning a primary actually helped you? Want to take that first, Steve?
Sure. The viability question, is the key question. Lots of people, love independence, but why waste your vote? So I've gotten that plenty. Got an earful. So even the newspapers don't want to waste their endorsements on people who don't have any chance of winning. So in my case, I really focused on what's important for a person who's going to vote for insurance commissioner. It's not the most top of mind position when people go out to vote. As it turns out, people want to vote for a person for insurance commissioner that will hold down insurance rates and will hold insurance companies accountable, that kind of thing. So focusing on my track record of doing that really helped my viability because people ended up believing, oh yeah, if you can get that message out there, voters will vote for you. And it worked before when I was elected in 2007. So that's the key. Now, post-primary, I do think our viability, now that we've won primaries, have really gone way up. And so I think the viability question is starting to subside now that we've actually shown we can win, an election.
Have you seen a difference in the last week?
Yes, my inbox is full of people who want me to fill out their forms and offer an endorsement, which beforehand people were waiting, and they also did not want to upset either party, so they were looking down the line. Viable. Anything else? I will say, you mentioned that you were an insurance commissioner before and that you thought it should be nonpartisan. Healthcare is nonpartisan. And when you approach people on the line of healthcare and talk to them about health, their relationship with their doctor, a physician who sits and listens and is their advocate, and use that as a jumping off point for what a representative should be. Someone who listens and is their advocate and will work in their best interest. The politics of party doesn't enter that.
An idea for all of you, and that is these down ticket positions in every state are perfect fits for independents. Like in California, there's 8 positions elected statewide, 6 of them perfect fits for independents. Treasurer, controller, superintendent of public construction, secretary of state, oh my goodness, perfect fit for an independent. So I would just toss out there the idea of not just legislative races, which is super important, but some of these executive positions that aren't very partisan would be a good place for the movement to focus.
And we're just going to cut Nick out altogether and keep going
I'm
on our riff. So I will point out it in the county commissioner race. For the very first time, we had 4 independents and 1 Republican. And folks had no idea what to do with that.
I'd like to open it up in a minute, so think of your questions here. What's one perhaps unexpected lesson that you've learned that you think is most important to share with other candidates in the room?
Get glasses that fit. I'll leave them for the moment because I don't need them. I'll be personal.
They felt deeply behind there.
Okay, I'll get them afterwards. My son left for college. He's now a junior. And he came home this summer and dedicated his summer to knocking on doors with me. I've had my son as my surrogate every single day. And I can't tell you what a gift that is, because I have a very independent young man. And to be in the car with him driving across the state and camping and spending our evenings talking about what was the craziest door you knocked on? Did you know that he had a peregrine falcon inside? I mean, people are amazing. But on top of that, I'll tell you that story. On top of that, my partner, who is not very outgoing, polished the truck. He's got a 54 Chevy and came to every parade. And the people who back you up and who walk the walk with you, I love these people so dearly. My family, my friends who have just stood with me, this experience has strengthened those bonds beyond what I could ever have anticipated. So they're not here, but thank you.
It's awesome. Your son sounds amazing. My daughter still thinks what I'm doing is boring. Gosh. The biggest surprise for me so far has been the impact of, or the lack thereof, of President Trump. So I was, gosh, you know, the media may be everywhere, but in California, the media is completely consumed 24/7 on President Trump. Pro or con, whatever, completely consumed. So, you know, I was expecting in editorial board meetings, with conversations with donors who love President Trump, with conversations with donors who hate President Trump, I was expecting that to come up. I'm stunned that it rarely comes up. I mean, not that it's not on their minds, of course, that's all they're thinking about, but I'm just pleased to say that when you're running for an office, so far, people have sort of taken it seriously. What are you running for? What are the issues related to your office? I'm just so super pleased that I haven't gotten all tangled up, you know, in DC politics so far.
Great. Let's open it up if you wouldn't mind just approaching the microphone on either side so folks can hear you. First question over there, Chris Vance.
Forgive me, Nick, just a comment more than a question.
Shout.
Ann Diamond is an example of, I'm Chris Vance from Washington State. She's an example, I think, a lesson to all of us that candidate quality is critical. We had over 30 independents run for the Washington State legislature in our primary. None of them got over 10% of the vote, other than Ann. That's because the vast majority of them just filed, didn't work very hard, didn't raise any money. That's not going to win. She raised $50,000 before we even knew she existed, had a huge army of volunteers, flooded her district with signs, ran a very professional campaign, and plus, you can tell she's just a great candidate. It's not enough for us to just find people who are willing to run. We've got to find people who are willing to run real campaigns, and that's what it takes to win. That's why she's there.
Well said. So, Ann, how did you do it? If you've never run for office before, how did you figure out to raise the money, put together the team, actually go out and get it done?
I come from a very small town of very dedicated people. We have human capital. My neighbor is my treasurer, the recycler. Betsy has a full-time job running a very successful recycling center in rural Washington. And these people came together, and it is about team. They believed in me, and I will say one of the strongest things I've gotten back from them is on Tuesday night when we had our 30 people gather in our community center, which is a 1921 one-room schoolhouse, and we sat down to a yummy dinner. People stood up and spoke about how being part of this gave them hope. And I'm going to hold on to that for the next 2 months as I knock on a couple more thousand doors. That by being the prow of this ship, I am not directing anything, but I am helping people who want to volunteer, want to be a part of the movement that's been discussed here. They see that it's viable, they believe, and I'm really just the point and shoot. Go knock on a door, go raise money. That's what we're doing, and I'm accepting that, and I let them do all the rest of the work.
Bob.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Bob Pearls from New Mexico. Steve, I was really intrigued by your comment about having run successfully in a closed primary, and how different it felt to you now to be an authentic independent under a top two system. And Ann, I'd love to hear your comments as well. But Steve, what does that mean for the viability of independence if you've got a closed primary system? I'd like you both to comment, whatever your thoughts are, about how our viability is tied into whatever the primary structure is within a state, if you have opinions about how important that is, or if you think you could be successful no matter what the status of the primary system is.
Well, I do think the top two primary in California was a critical first step. So there are people in California that have been working on this for 10 years. And without it, I really couldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I'm so appreciative and thankful for the work that's been going on in California and elsewhere for a decade. And here I come along, just good timing, and thank goodness there's been other people been working on this thing for so long. And now I get to take it to the next step because I can now run as a viable independent. Thank goodness for the top two. I've run in a closed primary. I just can't imagine how you could be successful, running against a powerful Republican and a powerful Democrat, and then trying to get on the ballot in the general. It would be impossible in California without this election reform.
Just in the interest of time, we'll take our final three questions. So, Paul.
Thanks. Ann, you mentioned that your inbox is full of candidate surveys, and I'm just curious, having received a bunch of those and started trying to work through them, ultimately they seem to devolve into a yes or no answer. They're trying to put us as independents in a red box or a blue box. And I'm just curious what your experience with that is, how you're approaching it, and your philosophy on that sort of process.
Okay, I'm a newbie. What I'm finding is that most of the endorsement questions are incredibly detailed, and if I'm going to answer them truthfully, I have to do research. And so what they become are basically a lobbying tool for various special interest groups who want you to understand their positions, guised as questions. How do you feel about this? And I have to say, as I've done 20 of them now, and some of them are 6 pages long and very in-depth about specific legislation, you start to tire. And I'm not doing as many.
Question.
Hi, my question is for Steve. I was wondering, when you ran as a Republican, both for insurance commissioner, I also remember you running for governor of California, if there were certain positions you felt pressured to take, whether or not you did, that you don't feel as an independent.
That's a great question. Absolutely tons of pressure from party leaders, not only when you're running for office, but when I'm insurance commissioner, elected as a Republican, the party leaders thought that means they could call me anytime with their special interest issues and so forth. It is unbelievably liberating to feel zero pressure to take any position on anything that doesn't have to do with the office that I'm running for and the consumers that I would be elected to protect. And not only liberating as a candidate, but doubly liberating as an office holder.
Thank you. All right, final question.
Hi, good morning. My name is Nick Rognes from Sacramento, California chapter. Well, back in college, I studied political science, and one of the things that I learned is that the only legislature in the world that's more measurably polarized than the United States Congress is the California State Legislature. You go to any of the districts west of Sacramento, and the Democrat wins there in the last election by a 2-to-1 margin. You go east of Sacramento, all the districts there, same thing for the Republicans. So my question for you, since California, we're looking to run some more independent candidates in the future, and I'm expecting it's going to be a bit of a tough nut to crack. So I wanted to ask you both, how do we find those independent candidates to break the mold, and where do we find them?
Why don't you both take that as a final question? How do you get others to follow in your footsteps of what you're doing this election cycle?
You succeed. It really builds on little successes. And so if you're starting at the legislative level, which is where I started, it perhaps is more difficult. But pick your little successes, start with the down ballot races, and win. And when people see that you can win, folks will be knocking on your door.
So one of my favorite presidents of all time, Teddy Roosevelt. Any TR fans here? Great president, right? He said, one of his famous lines, the most famous lines, he said, do what you can with what you have where you are. I love that line because what he's saying is, don't try to conquer the whole world, or don't be afraid of not being able to solve every problem out there. And I do really think the movement needs to focus on these small wins, as Ann just said. And so in California, it might not be running for the legislature because we can't pull off the Fulcrum strategy in California. Maybe in California, it's focusing on these down ticket races where we can recruit some really talented people. That might apply to other states that have closed primaries where the election reform is not in there. So I think we need to be really thoughtful, you know, as a movement to rifle shoot into the appropriate opportunities in the right states, and little bit of progress every day, every week, every year. Let's not try to conquer the world all at once, because that could be, you know, a tough strategy to pull off if we bite off too much.
I think these two are going to make some history in November. Let's give them a round of applause.